All right, welcome to the last session on the second day of the conference. So, woo, right? Woo! I am so impressed to actually see you all here. I was thinking it was going to be like 5 people, right? We'd have this little conversation, but it's so much better to have you all here because what we're going to do today is continue a conversation about how to make it easier for businesses to get started and make things happen. So from the government side of things as well as from the technology side. So let me first introduce myself. My name is Star Wilbraham. I work with the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs at the U.S. Small Business Administration. I am connected and I'm here today because most recently I've been working on an initiative called Startup in a Day. Who has heard of Startup in a Day? There we go. Okay, so some of you have not, so I'll do a little intro on that. So the White House had an idea. There was a couple folks literally at the White House who started writing on napkins. And this is the story as I understand it. This concept of like, well, how do we get more cities to really commit to making it easier for entrepreneurs to get started? Because now the reality is that there's a bunch of bureaucracy and getting started, and taking, I think we were talking about 140 days in one city to do it, is going to not have an actual company in that time frame. So how do we make it easier? So as many initiatives have been happening recently with the White House, a pledge was born. And in this pledge, it said that a city would take about 12 months to make it easier. And if they could, they would use online resources and implement those to do that. So what better way to get folks to actually take a pledge, but is to put some money behind it, right? So SBA then got involved, and we came up with $1.6 million to give out to 25 cities across the country, and then 2 Native American communities, and then 1 additional city for a second prize competition. And so both of these prize competitions took place. They were announced in June, and the winners were announced in August. So that might blow some folks' minds. A lot happening in just a very short amount of time, and that's government. And I'll top that with that the application to apply for one of these prize competitions was just 2 pages. Can you believe that? Right? The next piece about this being a prize is that it's under the American Competes Act versus your regular federal government grant. And because of that, we were funding an idea. And so there is no expectation of a certain deliverable, of a very defined deliverable at the end of the 12 months. It's, we are giving you this money to take your idea and run with it. And what we hope is that in the end, you make it easier for an entrepreneur to start and hopefully start in 1 day period, or basically get started in a lot less time than it's taking now. And so I still have folks who are like, what? I don't have to fill out 1,000 forms to get this grant money, because it's a prize in actuality. So this is all, I'm giving you all this context because this is really about a conversation about doing things differently. And so we have 3 folks here who are representing 2 different cities, and one of our vendors who is helping some cities actually get this off the ground. So let me introduce those folks in just a second, but I first really want to know who is here in the audience, because that I think will help our conversation immensely, because there's a lot of differences between cities, and how they're going to approach this challenge is going to come from a lot of different ways. So first of all, how many folks here come from what they would consider a large city? Raise your hands. Okay, about half the group. How many come from what they consider a small city? And then tell me what you consider as small.
50,000.
50, 40. Any?
350,000.
350,000 is small. Okay. So, I mean, again, that means a lot of difference in a lot of different places, right? And so who actually already has some type of web portal already set up for entrepreneurs to find information about getting started? So raise your hands there. Maybe a dozen of the folks here. How many folks have already started the conversation about building something if you don't already have something? Only a few. Okay, so can then we say the rest of the folks are like just thinking about this, that maybe you're totally new to this conversation and you want some ideas on how to get started? Yes? Yeah? Okay. Any other identifiers that folks want to shout out as being specific to your city? Yes?
For Anchorage, we received one of the awards, and I want to cheat off San Francisco, Boston, and
Okay. So you want to cheat. Okay, great. This is all about talking about government. No. Borrow. Permanently borrow, as they say. Any other identifiers folks want to say? Yes? Okay, private companies wanting to make that interaction easier. By the way, we are being recorded, so I'm probably going to repeat the questions, and we'll make sure to use the mic when we get to the Q&A part. Any other identifiers? No? Okay, well, I think that gives us a little bit of sense. Any other questions that you would want?
Yeah,
yes.
I'm curious. How many of the different cities is the city and the county the same government?
So city-county entities.
Yeah, is the same.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 folks there. Because some folks that's combined, like San Francisco, it's a city-county versus a city or a county. All right. So we'll leave it at that. The agenda here for us today is the goal here is to continue the conversation about. So we're going to tell you a little bit about the challenges and opportunities that Boston and LA have come up with, and what Open Counter has seen and working with these cities. We're then going to show you some short demos, very short. Then I'm gonna pose a couple questions. We'll go into a little bit more about those challenges and opportunities, and then we'll bring it out to you, probably for you to share maybe some of your challenges and opportunities. What are you seeing from where you are? And then, of course, if you have questions for our panelists, we'll go from there. All right? Great. So let me introduce our panel for today. I'll just do it in order from where we are. First, we have Joel Mahoney. He is with one of the co-founders of Open Counter. And Open Counter, while it's not the only vendor that can help with creating some solutions, and just saying that coming from SBA, we did not endorse one particular vendor in this, but Open Counter has been part of the story of creating the Startup in a Day initiative from the beginning, and so very appropriate for them to kind of be here to, again, tell the story and continue the conversation. Then we have Matt Merrill, who's with the City of Boston. You'll note that Matt and Joel have been working together in creating Boston's solution. They've been working on it for a couple of years now. A year now. So they're a little bit further along than a lot of our cities. So they can show you where they're at now, but they've got some ways to go too. And then we also have Frank Aguirre, who is with the City of Los Angeles, where you all have been working on this, talking about this for a little while, but you are still looking to actually implement and deploy a solution, correct? Okay. And so, and just letting you know, so Frank being from LA was our Dream Big winner, and they actually received $250,000 through the Startup in a Day initiative, because they will also be creating a solution for their city, but it will also be open source. So in the 12-month time, they will have a solution that then could be shared with other cities across the country. The Start Small winners each received $50,000. Boston was one of those winners, and that will probably help, maybe some of our smaller cities to, start something big and new for them. For Boston, it'll probably help them take what their current solution is to the next level, something like that. So with that said, let me hand it over to the panelists to, again, give you a little context for what we're really talking about here. with our short demos. So Matt, are you going first?
Sure.
Great.
Am I going up to the podium or?
So Joel, do you want to navigate for him? Would that work?
Sure.
Would you
I
like
think
me to
I'll provide
navigate?
context and then hand it to Joel. Sure.
Okay. Great.
Great. Really excited to be here on behalf of the City of Boston, talking to everyone about the efforts we've undertaken really in the past year and a half. So our story as it relates to how we got to focusing on permitting and licensing and the challenges faced by small businesses really started with the election of Mayor Walsh in January 2013. And throughout his time on the campaign trail, he had heard a huge amount of frustration from business owners, contractors, developers, homeowners who said, every time I try to pull a permit for something, it's a bad experience. It's something which is hard to predict, and it's a really difficult maze and Byzantine set of regulations that make it difficult for us to grow in Boston and help contribute to the future of Boston. So he came into office with a strong desire to start unraveling that, and gave our office, the Department of Innovation and Technology, a mandate to start doing what is a really simple vision but very difficult in practice to achieve, which is to make permitting in Boston easy, clear, and predictable. So we've been working at that really for the past year and a half, maybe a year and 9 months. And we've been approaching it from a perspective that technology is at the core of helping to solve some of that, but it is certainly not alone sufficient to solve those, to achieve that vision. So Joel has been a partner on one of our major technology initiatives, so we'll go into that in a moment here, but I want to talk generally about the framework that we're using to approach the permitting experience, because we're trying to drive it from the user experience here. So in addition, to really make the process better, we've looked at probably 4 things. And I would say the first is setting up some performance management infrastructure. So knowing that if you can make the application process easier, certainly, but if people aren't getting their permits or licenses in a faster amount of time, you aren't fully improving that experience. So we did some initial work around data aggregation, setting up a performance management initiative that's helped to shave a week off of plan review time so far, and will continue to grow as we continue to have better data to manage. The second is to look at the underlying regulation. So we do have a complex set of licenses and permits required for the city. Those all have a history behind them. Some of them that they are still relevant, some of them may have outgrown their usefulness, and some of them we are actually not responsible for needing to enforce that regulation. We have state law or preempting legislation that requires us to issue a particular license. My favorite example of this is that in Boston, if you want to have any automated entertainment device in a bar or restaurant, which would include a TV even, you need a license from the city of Boston. That's something the mayor and his leadership, myself included, are very actively interested in getting out of the business of licensing TVs, but we can't do it until state law changes. So there's been an effort to make sure that we are pushing at the state level to give us the flexibility to change our underlying regulations. The third area is around things which are not kind of encapsulated in regulation, but are just about our internal business process, and that if we need to be looking at everything with a fresh set of eyes. And for an example of what we're doing here, we had traditionally had a process whereby if you need a zoning variance, everyone goes through the exact same process, whether you're a 60-story office tower in downtown Boston or you're a homeowner looking to put a new bathroom addition on your master bedroom. And so we've split those into 2 separate, we recognize that those are 2 fundamentally different sets of work, and split those into 2 different approval processes. The fourth area, which I'll highlight briefly and then let Joel walk through some of our recent accomplishments, is really about improving underlying technology, right? And that is not just in the web platform, although a very important part of it, but it's also around giving tools to the permit reviewers and the building inspectors, which make their work more efficient so that they can bring down the time that's needed, and about inviting Boston's community of technologists into the process of us helping to re-envision what a customer-driven experience is like. So we actually hosted our first civic hackathon around the challenge of permitting, and brought about 100 technologists and Boston companies and national companies together to work at 4 challenges as it relates to permitting. So we've tried to put a spotlight on this as an important public policy area, but also invite a discussion, knowing that, quite frankly, if the same people had thought of the new solution that's thought of the old solution, we would probably end up with something that looked a lot like the old solution and wouldn't get us to where we really want to be. So one of our biggest initiatives has been launching a new permitting portal, which will launch this month. And I'll been partnering very closely with Joel on that, and let him walk through that platform for everyone.
Great, I'll just stay sitting.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joel Mahoney, co-founder of OpenCounter. OpenCounter started as a Code for America project in 2012, and our goal is really to build a modern set of tools for online permitting. We started with a focus on business permitting in particular, but are expanding the scope to include residential permitting, special events, ultimately all of the permits that are issued typically by cities. That work has definitely reflected our engagement with Boston. We will be going live at permits.boston.gov. So this is a very ambitious project and a broad scope, and really thinking through the user experience and current challenges of this process for people. So the project started with the realization that the counter is often closed. After the economic downturn in California, the counters, might only be open a few hours a day, a few days a week. And if you put yourself into the shoes of, someone who's trying to open, a restaurant or, their dream company while holding down a full-time job, that small logistical issue can be a big deal for them, because they have to go to City Hall, maybe they show up at the end of their workday and find the counter is closed. And we feel like that was just kind of the tip of the iceberg on the user interface challenges of this process. I mean, for starters, a physical trip to City Hall, then you find a kind of unwelcoming experience in some cases. The forms, I'm sure we're all familiar with the forms. We joke about reducing the carbon footprint of cities in the sense of reducing the carbon copy forms that cities are using. It can be a really daunting experience. And we use an example from Santa Cruz, California, where the project really originated, of an ice cream parlor called Penny Ice Creamery. It took them 24 permits to get their ice creamery, the ice cream parlor up and running. And this is all understandable for the people behind the counter who are doing this process. But if you're a prospective business owner, maybe this is your first attempt at opening a company, this really can be daunting. And the consequences for getting it wrong are pretty intense. I mean, if you miss a permit and open your restaurant and then you get a call from the city saying, hey, you forgot your grease trap permit, you may have to shut down until that's finished. As Star mentioned, I mean, we're also hearing from cities that, when this process is 140 days to open a business, I mean, that's in no one's interest to have the process take that long. I mean, mayors don't want their cities to be so unwelcoming to businesses. It's not a great experience for business owners. So we're thrilled to have been, somewhat involved in this startup in a day concept. We feel like that's exactly the kind of aspirational vision that we all need to be striving towards in thinking about how to reform this process. So we're a technology company. Obviously we're working not on a policy level, but at a technical level to think about what can be done, at the user interface of this process, and as we move that online. I guess to conclude, one thing that's been really interesting for us to observe in all of the partner cities that we're working with about 24 cities across the country, is really this legacy of the paper forms. I mean, there are people whose job titles are still, named after a form, a paper form, like long form permit manager. And so it's kind of funny, but there are very significant consequences when so much has been based on kind of these ideas from the eGov era of just digitizing paper forms that, for instance, there's no concept of a project. And therefore, when the mayor asks, how long does it take for a business project to get fully permitted, that answer is non-trivial for the city to answer, because all the permits that are part of that project aren't actually connected with a foreign key ID. So it's been very interesting for us to start working on this set of problems and really think about how technology can be applied to helping entrepreneurs have an easier, streamlined experience of opening up their companies.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Frank Aguirre. I'm with Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti's Office of Economic Development. Our effort in diving into helping entrepreneurs start a business really started from the mayor's back to the basics agenda. And part of his top priorities was he simply put, just like a CEO would put their mission and their priorities, making it easier to do business in the city and nourishing small business. So with that said, that gave us the opportunity to really dig in about a year and a half ago into this topic. It simply started off with going out and doing presentations, giving surveys out, realizing that this is a real quick, interesting story, because it's a little tied into something that happened today. But when the mayor took office, we had a website where we had information on business resources. The website went down. I got a call from the library economic development staff. Said, "Hey, are you in charge of the website?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, we're gonna be doing it. It's down." I'm like, "From the library, your people are coming to you to use the website. What are they coming to you for?" I was like, "First, we need to learn how to. We change of administration. We're going to pay the bill. Don't worry, it'll be back up." But the second, the second thing is the realization that a lot of people don't know where to go to get assistance on how to start their business, resources for business. A lot of them are going to the libraries. So this started off this citywide initiative where we went out to all the different cities, talked to all the different stakeholders, created a presentation, and delivered it. Well, we really, and this is something that I just have been working on for the last several years, really found out that the process of starting a business really involves four basic steps that all businesses go through. One of the first ones there with the city of Los Angeles is that all businesses need to register with the city. Now, the other step is with the county. That's why I asked the question with the county. But that step, and the reason for the step is a little different. It's for purposes of personal identification, right? That's where you get your fictitious name and you're doing business as. The third step is with the state of California. It's if you're a reseller, you need a resale permit, or you got to identify your use again, right? And the final step is your federal identification. Now, the interesting part of this, as I went out there and looked at, well, how do we help small business? I came across an SBA statistics that 80% of the California small businesses have no employees. So what does that mean? That means that these are the freelancers, the independent contractors, and what are they looking for? What is their use? As what I saw, what we were doing previously is that we said, hey, freelancer and person looking to create or start a coal generator power plant, this is how you start a business. Where the entrepreneur is just like, I don't know why I'm supposed to be talking to you. I just heard I might get fined, and I heard I'm supposed to do that. I don't know how this is going to help me get more customers, so let me look this up. And so this is really an effort of streamlining this process. One interesting aspect of this is that you can do some of these steps after you launch. In other words, you don't have to register with the city or the state until a couple months after you launch. So this made me realize that actually launching a business and registering your business startup are two different things. These steps, this is what almost every business has to go through. The other challenge is if I told you that possibly your business would only have to do one of those steps, and you can do it in 15 minutes, maybe less. Would you believe me? Probably not. But let me give you a little scenario how that would work. If you're a freelancer, in LA it's a little different because we have actors. So the thing is, you only have to register if you do more than 7 days of work in the city. If you do less, you don't even have to register. So first is key is really identifying entrepreneurs. Are you a business? Let's say you got that figured out. You're a business, and you need to register in the city. Okay, fine, you register it. Hands down, everybody has to register. Second step, do you even need to register with the county? Depends. The purpose there is to identify yourself, right? You can't call yourself McDonald's, but if you're going to use your name as your identifier, at least in the county of Los Angeles, guess what? You don't even have to register. Skip that step. Third step, state of California. If you're going to resell something, you need a permit to resell, basically collect taxes from the end user, give it back to the state, right? But if it's just a use permit, saying you're just that freelancer using that service, if it's less than $100,000, guess what? You don't have to do that step. Fourth step, if you decide you really want to use your Social Security as your federal identification number, guess what? There's no need to do an EIN. You're done. So we're really going back to the basics on this and say, where are we serving? What's the majority of the businesses that do it? I know I've talked to people that say, well, I want to launch a high-tech company and I need venture capital from it. It's like, okay, I get it. That's a little different. We are also working on other steps for building and planning. Those are also, but there are also different processes that take place. So where the city of LA is on a $20 million project for planning and coding. But essentially, as we look at it, as we look at the process, also look at that, where is the bulk of the client need? It's in that 80%. Los Angeles very much mirrors the state, and that the majority of entrepreneurs, whether they're part-timers, or just simply someone that simply, there's no purpose for them to learn how to start a business. How is that going to add a value to their business, and how many times do they ever have to go? So I think the key as we focus on it is using this as a framework, and yes, it's going to get harder and harder as you go along. But I think as we kind of focus on basics, we kind of build out from there. And that's what we're hoping to really compartmentalize so if you're from whatever XYZ city, yes, your federal step's kind of the same. It can get a little more complicated. Sure, the state, the same. The basic application and everything is the same. Where it might get tricky is if your city and county is the same. But otherwise, in the county of LA, there's 88 other cities just within the county. Plus unincorporated. So we really are hoping to deliver, or planning to deliver, a solution where essentially it's kind of the design is stackable. You just switch out your city and plug in. Will we direct people to the other resources, everything else they need to do? Yeah, but whether or not they hire a good architect for their plans is one thing. Whether or not they hire a good contractor to pass building inspection, sure, yeah, we want people to do that and reduce that as limited, but those are also other processes and other steps. We're just trying to navigate that and design it really from that aspect. So who's coming? What are their needs? What specifically they're doing, and making that as easy as possible from the ABC's standpoint, and then building from there.
Great. So we'll go on to a couple kind of questions here in a second. I did just want to note that Jane Gong was also going to be on our panel today, but unfortunately she was ill today, so she couldn't join us. But she does thank you all for coming and hopes to connect with you at some point. And so one of the first questions I have is, in this process that you've gone through so far, Matt and Frank, what have you learned about what you do in the city as your business? Like, so how have you changed? What have you learned to do differently having gone through this process? So what I hear from a lot of the applicants that we've had going, we didn't win the money, but this has at least started a conversation. So we are starting to think about how accounting works better with economic development, which works better with the permitting office. So what examples do you have of those types of lessons learned?
I think from the Boston perspective, there are probably two examples. One is trying to tie together both the business processes and the underlying technology stuff into a coordinated suite of efforts, right? That's not always something that the city has done, and trying to make sure that those work in tandem and support each other, so that we're launching platforms that give us better data, that we have performance management efforts that are making sure that that data is used, and that we're communicating that data back to the public, both through our open data portal and through some custom web tools. Having that all aligned, I think, has given us a little extra, has been more effective than kind of leaving IT and technology as a silo. The second would be, I think it's been very important for us to recognize that while we were on a journey of probably a year and a half to relaunch the whole city's permitting website, we were able to deliver some quick wins, and that many of those are achievable with relatively little investment. So the first thing we did was recognizing that we had a web platform to get permits today, which was difficult to navigate. But the hardest thing to do on it was find out where your permit was in the review process. So people would put a permit in, they'd walk away, they'd feel like it went into a black hole, and then 40 days later, they would have to call someone and follow up and say, hey, where's my permit? We we worked on assembling the data and getting an extract out of our existing system that allowed people to query, where's my permit right now? We did a lot of work on making sure that that language was not in the speak of the IT platform that we had and was in the speak of actual commonplace language, but was something which we were able to develop coming out of the hackathon for a relatively small investment that I think has demonstrated a sense of progress and added value while we're still working towards this bigger goal.
Some of the great lessons. First, thanks to the SBA for this challenge and this opportunity, because it really allowed us to dig in deeper into the subject matter. I mentioned a lot of this I learned only within the last few months, because given this opportunity, we knew it out there, but the city still, just kind of the different government agencies, we kind of worked in silos. So even if we all had different forms and applications, but this has given us an opportunity to really realize that just like the different government agencies are asking pretty much the same questions, the same thing happens within our departments. We have our Office of Finance that handles the business licenses, Building and Safety that handles all the permitting, sanitation, XYZ, DWP, all that's involved. But we're realizing this has given us an opportunity to really go back to the beginning and said, if we're going to be asking this, right now we're asking them to refill out new forms and new applications. This is give us an opportunity to say this is the start with a form that can be shared across departmental lines, ultimately cross governmental lines is would be the larger goal.
Great. Can anyone relate to silos? Yes. Okay. Yes, definitely. We'll probably hear some stories from that in a second. Joel, I wanted to ask you. You said you work with about 24 cities across the U.S. Is that right? Not worldwide yet. Not yet. Right. So you have a perspective of seeing a lot of different implementations of this type of change and renewal. So can you tell us a little bit about what you see as the opportunities and challenges for, say, a smaller city versus a larger city, if there is any difference there, or maybe there's other differences that we wouldn't expect that you could tell us about, please?
One issue, in terms of working with smaller and larger cities, is larger cities obviously have a bigger IT footprint of existing, vendor infrastructure, and we're working very hard to make OpenCounter kind of an easy user-facing layer to plug into a city, no matter what their kind of back-end infrastructure looks like. And definitely kudos to Boston for, they actually built their own API on their back-end system to make this all possible. I mean, it would have been very difficult for us to do this project if they hadn't laid that groundwork. So, there's a certain set of challenges working with bigger cities, just in the kind of operational sense of, building something that is easy to deploy and integrate with these existing systems and workflows, and knowing that large investments have been made in the existing technology. Smaller cities, it's interesting that I think some of the software is really from kind of the shrink wrap software era, like where the price tags are very large, and some of these smaller cities just couldn't afford that kind of software. And so it's really interesting to go into those cities and see the kind of the business processes that they have in place to handle this this service, which is obviously a core service for all city governments. Often in those cities, we end up, instead of integrating with backend systems, we're printing the PDF forms that they're used to working with, and often we're feeding into an actual paper process. Like, we're not trying to forcibly, convert the whole process to digital. We're really trying to understand how they're operating. It's exciting in those settings. I mean, anecdotally, one story that really stood out to me is we're working with the city of Truckee, California. After a demo with them, a senior planner came up to me and said, we're so excited for your product, not for the percentage of applicants that make it all the way through and click submit, but maybe more so for the 80 or so percent that don't get all the way through, and we never see those. They never hit our process. So they're kind of invisible to us. And your tool, as a modern kind of digital experience, gives us all those analytics. And so now we can say, how many people are trying to open restaurants in the old rail yard district that isn't zoned for restaurants, and that maybe we should rethink our zoning if we're seeing a lot of interest in new uses and new locations. And so I think in that sense, it's really the Silicon Valley playbook of, building tools that reveal user interaction with the process, and then refining and reforming the process to better correspond with actual user needs. So that's a very exciting thing to see that actually starting to happen.
Great, thank you. I'll ask one more question before we bring it out to the audience, and this is for all three of you, if you all want to answer. So anytime we change process, we oftentimes make the process easier for some and harder for others. And so the issue of equity and access become very important in the conversation. And so I was just wondering if any of you had any anecdotes about how you have dealt with the challenge of potentially making the process more cumbersome for some. An example may be like you have, now it's a smooth system, so you can ask lots of questions and collect lots of data, right? But in terms of people wanting to answer a lot of questions, that might make it harder, maybe. There might be others. Or now you've actually been able to make it more accessible to a certain population in your city that would not have otherwise been served. So any 1, 2, 3 of you want to take that?
I'll just start quickly in saying that I think a lot of the mayor's goals and our goals in taking on this challenge really were equity focused, in that he recognized that when you have a complex and confusing system with a bad with a bad web interface to it, that inherently benefits those who are experts in the process, or who can hire experts in the process. Mm-hmm. So many of the projects that even small work in people's homes required someone to actually go and hire a professional permit expediter to get that through the process in the city of Boston. Okay. And that was really central to why the mayor said, look, we have to make this so that this is accessible to small businesses, this is accessible to the homeowner who wants to do it themselves. And then I think, the other benefit, obviously, of moving towards a more modern platform here is that we're actually able to build this out in a mobilely responsive page, right? That we have a lot of people for whom I think initial application will largely still be on a computer, just because of the amount of typing that's needed for that. But when you think about checking in, being on a job site, checking in on the progress of your permits, having that be available on a mobile device is extraordinarily important, and actually makes the process much, much easier, and available to that subsection of population that really relies on mobile device for their primary internet connection.
It's a great feedback, great point, because it's very, very similar. As I mentioned that we started at first, this inspiration came from the libraries, realizing that there's something, I don't know if anybody else has used the term, but the library entrepreneur, someone that's really just looking for that extra income and that extra paycheck. They might not have internet access at home. They might be just getting it, so they might be going to the library. It can serve as a little bit of an incubator, that printers, internet access, information, resources there. So really we're focusing on anchoring there, because then it can grow. I sometimes I'll have people say, well, what about, are you going to help someone form a corporation? It's like, well, that's different. I don't think that population is necessarily focusing on that. And quite frankly, if you need to develop a C Corp to go public, you should probably still go talk to an attorney or something like that. But so we're really kind of focusing on that level, and that's who we're going to outreach to moving forward. I learned this in the process when I was out giving workshops. I went into some of the lower income neighborhoods in LA, thinking this is by my early on attempt to this topic. Too many people might not show up here at the Watts Library or something like that, but it ended up having great turnout. People because there was a lot of interest, a lot of need. You simply kind of took away this process and made it easy. So we're definitely going to stick to that and get it out there. But I think ultimately, just by the nature of everything on the internet and creating that accessibility, it's going to be accessible across the board.
Joel, did you?
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, I think we feel like we're just augmenting. I mean, the human process still exists. You can still go to the counter. So we feel like it's a net, plus, onto the existing process. I really liked Libby Schaff's comments about the digital bridge, compared with the digital divide. I think there is so much potential for these tools to connect us in new ways. I mean, as an example, we're translating the Boston project into 8 different languages. Again, can you really have people at the counter who can speak all those languages? I mean, that's probably a difficult thing to accomplish. Lastly, on kind of a personal note, we had a lot of advisors kind of prompting us to think about doing this company as a consumer-focused company. So people would pay for a premium level of government service. And we really just philosophically, Peter and I just decided that, we feel like these services are core government services and they shouldn't come with a separate fee for citizens. So I think we're definitely committed to keeping those issues in mind.
Great. All right, I'm actually going to grab the remote mic because now it's your turn. Again, as a conversation, it's not going to be your typical Q&A in that if you actually have a story you want to share in terms of what you're doing in your city, that's definitely welcomed. I just asked that we wanted to get to as many folks as possible. We have about 15 minutes left, and so if we can kind of keep those short, because I know we could all talk about this pretty much all day long, right? So with that, I'm hoping some folks have some questions. Are there stairs on that side? Check it out. There we go. So questions, I know other questions that I was thinking of asking that might help is about privacy, about setting up our systems to be available for open data, but...
And I think that's something that I just want to go. Renee Velez from the city of Newark, we actually just launched our business license application yesterday. It went live. So my question is kind of folded. Is there a second round for businesses?
That is the hot question, isn't it? At this time, there is not money that has been appropriated to SBA for the purposes of doing a second round of Startup in a Day. But that's for at least FY16. Perhaps something could happen in FY17, and being good old government, you know who to call if you want to see something done, right? And Absolutely. We're open today. So, because we might have been shut down as of yesterday, so we're open for business and all of your calls. So.
Okay. For you, is Open Counter user based? So, for instance, as in City of Newark, We have about 30 people that need licenses. So how would you kind of work that in the sense of the budget? We didn't have a budget. So something that was estimated at $200,000, we ended up doing it with just 17. So how can you kind of relate and kind of pitch to other smaller municipalities or large municipalities the concept of the cost efficiency of getting your product?
Yeah, we don't sell licenses per seat. It's mostly a population-based model, but we also factor other things into that equation, and including volume of permitting through the system, and we're trying to align kind of the pricing model with the value that we're providing. But I think the value is definitely there. I mean, even simply the fact of offering tools that are available 24/7, as I said earlier. I mean, if people are holding down a full-time job, like that may be the only way that they can start this process. And so we're definitely, a fraction of the cost of kind of having, full-time employees like working on this process. And again, we feel like we're augmenting that existing system.
So I worked on similar projects like this when I worked for the World Bank, mostly in the Balkans. And when they got computers, this was one of the first things they wanted to do with them as government. But there were a lot of versions of I am the senior long form analyst, and then the junior long form. So I'd just be interested in, as you are working through this process, how do you manage the internal stakeholders who are resistant potentially to technology disrupting their positions?
Yeah, Matt, what do you think about that?
So I think by and large, people are very welcoming of technology, and I think particularly those government employees who have suffered through poor technology implementations, having a good one is a nice change of pace for them, and anything which helps them reduce calls to them for basic information questions. Sometimes bad web platforms lead you to black holes that then you have to call and you say, "What's my address? Because I can't find it in the search function," or "Where is my permit?" And that just takes up people's time. And so we were able to get a little bit of buy-in by saying, "Look, some of this will free up your time to do higher value work." There are some silos of information which have been challenging to pull out and make more openly available. So the city's zoning code is a notoriously complex document. I think it's 3,000 pages long and was previously available only in a non-machine readable PDF on the city's website. And one of our first challenges was to make, for the business permitting side, it more transparent to you upfront whether you were going to have, where you wanted to do your business, you would have to get a zoning, either a zoning variance, or alternatively, I have this business idea, where can I go and do it without having to get a zoning variance? So we went through a very long process that we had to staff ourselves. This is honestly how we did it. We just staffed it ourselves, of going through each page, putting it in an Excel sheet, which then became a database. And we just had to do it ourselves and prove and actually just push it out the door. There's a lot of fear about pushing it out the door, but once you got it out the door, actually, Joel and I were just talking about this, the platform we launched in June, so 4 months ago, now has over 5,000 views and we look at that going forward as a treasure trove of data, right? These are people who want to do something in the city, and they may have gone and now gotten a permit and are on their way to it, but we should be interfacing with those people who went and looked, expressed some interest in helping to build Boston in the form of a new business, and we should be proactively going out and getting them, because that's money in the door for the city, that's growth for the city, that's jobs for our residents.
Question, story, comments? Yes? Back we go. I'm back here.
One of the things that we're looking at as we start to move things online is managing input. So one of the things we're concerned
Can you speak into the mic? I'm sorry.
Yeah, one of the things we're looking at is trying to figure out how we're going to manage the inflow of applications, because the open counter concept is great, but one of the divisions manages the amount of work is they have a certain number of appointments every day, and that's the number of cases they'll take in. So what do you do when you go online and all of a sudden you're going to have a code change and there are 500 applications that day?
A code change in terms like
the building code change goes into effect September 1st.
I mean, I think we would basically reflect the process that happens currently. I mean, people have applications underway all the time, and there are regulatory changes happening. So we would just be alerting them to changes, and if that has any impact on pending applications. In terms of inflows of applications, we center on the concept of departments, and we do a lot of routing of help requests and the actual final permit submissions. We can route all of those to the right departments, so the fire department gets, the fire-related permits, et cetera.
Frank, will you have anybody on your team that is going to help with kind of looking into that process for addressing, quick reg changes or not so quick reg changes?
Yeah. So we do. In the city of LA, they're working on a project called Recode LA, where they're looking to deal with all these outdated codes and deal with the permitting and processing as well. But I think just on the user front, I'm not sure if this is the same with all cities, but there's a lot of home-based businesses that do not even need to deal with the building and safety if they're just hanging a business permit in their home office. So, but originally when we dove into this, I pulled up the home occupancy list, and it was several pages, very confusing. I didn't even know where to start looking. But really, on one end, the simple end, we want to synthesize that and keep people from necessarily reaching out to the building and safety if they don't need to. Basically saying, unless you're going to put a sign, change the use, or have a bunch of people coming in, and I guess it's a home business, there's no need for you mainly to really contact. So trying to help people sort through quickly, because we would get those calls, and at first I didn't really know what to say. I'd say, just talk to them, they'll figure it out for you, because I don't know. But as I talked to my colleagues that do deal with building and planning issues all day, we were able to kind of synthesize that.
Okay, great. Does anyone else
I have a question.
Super.
So I'm Efrem Beiser. I'm the Director of Economic Development at Code for America. Thank you, Star, and the panel for, I think, being with us today. This is a really interesting topic and something we're really excited to be supporting. We talked a lot about the practices of 21st century government, and one of those things is that we're really iterative and that we're kind of using the iterative process as opposed to kind of that waterfall to find little things and move little things forward. We know Open Counter kind of grew out of the iterative process through the fellowship and has continued to build and add on things that matter. I'm curious from how government, to our government partners, how you all are thinking about the iterative process and trying to do little things one at a time to understand how those are affecting the user experience.
Great question.
So that's a great question. When we set out on this journey, we started with a series of focus groups and interviews with small business owners. And when I referenced our first civic hackathon on permitting, the four challenges which we outlined were directly sourced from business owners who had gone through the permitting process. And they were what should be relatively simple things, right? One was, tell me which permits I need. One was, another one was, tell me where my permit is in the review process. Another was, help me find my address, which really should be simple, but is much more complex in practice than it seems that it should be. And the fourth was, let me get a couple permits online. So those were all challenges sourced from our user community. And in building out those solutions, we were able to start assessing some of the technical challenges behind it, which helped us then inform our RFP, which resulted in us selecting Open Counter as a partner in building it. As we roll forward the Open Counter platform in Boston, we will be doing it in an approach where we're releasing batches of permits together, going on site, working with users, seeing their actual interaction with the platform, so that we can see where they're getting stopped, what's unclear, because we've done everything we think we can, right? No one launches a perfect platform. and we all get it wrong. So we have to be there to watch and see exactly where our assumption was wrong, and be able to have a platform. A priority for us was one that having a fundamental technology stack and platform that would allow us to be flexible and changing that quickly, because I think that was a source of great frustration both on the city staff and on the customer side, was the speed of changes in the web platform.
And I would add to that, I mean, from our point of view, the RFP process was really interesting on this project. It's a big project. It's a 3-year project with the city of Boston. And the RFP came with a YouTube video of, interviews with a lot of business owners that were kind of expressing all of the things that Matt just described, their frustrations with this process. And it was really interesting to work through this RFP negotiation, knowing that we all wanted an iterative engagement, knowing that none of us know all the answers right now that we're, to the problems we're trying to solve. And I think it takes a lot of trust to sign that contract for a 3-year project where it isn't completely waterfall, every detail spec'd out. But I have a background in agile Scrum methodology, so it's very much in our DNA as a company to work that way. But it was a really refreshing process to kind of partner with a city that gets that, and you just see it already in the RFP. So
I'll use a little privilege on that to say one of the things Code for America talks about a lot is how we want to make sure that the tools we have are encoding a set of practices. Now, that often is a challenge, but one of the ways in which that is often articulated is through the RFPs. We know there are, I think we heard earlier about some of those companies, and it's not the companies are doing bad work, the companies are building to spec. And sometimes the specs aren't right or designed right. And I think the fact that in this conversation was actually highlighting the RFP, I think speaks to the important aspects of how procurement relates back to the tools we're building, the tools we're using to actually achieve some of those goals and objectives.
Great. So we are just about out of time. So I'm actually going to pose a question to the audience, and they're going to be for Frank specifically, your answers. But of course, Boston and Open Counter can probably glean from this as well. And then while you're thinking about that, I'm going to wrap it up with a couple announcements, and then we'll get your answers. So the question is that. So LA will be developing an open source solution. So I imagine that there are plenty of things that if you were building a system and had $250,000 or plus, things that you would like to see in that system. So we're gonna end it with you telling Frank and our panel what it is that you would like to see in that system. So let me give you a second to think about that. While you're thinking, part of the Startup in a Day initiative is that we do, at the moment, have 2 great partners. One is our National League of Cities, who is managing a community of practice for all of our winners, as well as our pledges for taking the Startup in a Day initiative. And so I really want to commend Ephraim for reaching out to SBA and for developing the relationship, because I think it's a key relationship for bringing together our government folks as well as our tech folks in a really beautiful way. And so we actually have an official strategic alliance that we are announcing at this conference that we are having with Code for America. And so I want to thank Ephraim for really helping to make that happen. The community of practice, we hope, will continue to bring resources to the cities that are a part of it. And so if you have not taken the pledge, I really encourage you to go back to your city and think about taking the pledge. And so if you don't know what it is and you need more information, I need you to come up and get my card, and let's have more of a conversation about how to get your city to do it. It's actually a very simple process to do it. I need 2 lines in an email from an official person to say we're taking the pledge. A lot of cities have more process than that, so I get beautiful pledges from the mayor saying, yes, we're on, and I'm like, that's beautiful. But if you want to do that, that's great. And then the third thing is that SBA is looking for tech folks in a bad way, really bad. We need tech folks. And so there are many ways to join government other than signing on for the next 30 years, like one might do used to. And they're actually, if you're in the tech world, you might be getting big money, but we have some money, and it's not too shabby, particularly for living in DC. So please talk to me if you at all know you're interested or know somebody else who is interested in connecting with SBA. It's actually, you would be a hire through the White House, and then they are helping out SBA, and it can be for a short amount of time or a longer period of time, and there's a lot of possibilities. So please talk to me about that. All right. So with that said, now you are on. What is it that you would like to see in a system? Yes, Newark.
So are you looking at the fact that all the data that you're getting in the sense of the demographic of if you're opening up a restaurant, are you looking the benefit for small businesses in the sense of that you can give a geographical map of in the radius of, let's say, 20 miles, what businesses are there, so you can actually do project-based needs for, let's say, if you need a laundromat that's in that area that there is none, if there is a certain store or industry, are you looking in the sense of that? When it comes to your
you don't have to address everything right now because we know you're just speeding your process, but it's great ideas. Other ideas. What would you like to see in your system? We'll just take another minute.
I think it would be great to incorporate in a system two things. One would be historic permit data that somebody might have on a piece of property once they've already selected a site, so that they could just push a button and all the historic permits, site plans, all of those things are available to them. And then secondly, the ability to have a good site plan. So in other words, if you know where your utilities are, your property lines, your existing infrastructure, something that's accurate and easy for somebody to print out as a starting point.
Great. Who else? It's good stuff. Other thoughts? All right. Well, we'll leave it at that. You know who to contact from there. I want to thank you all very much for coming on. I want to thank our panel very much for participating and sharing. And we hope you all continue the conversation because this is a lot to do. So, and thank you, Code for America and Nephrim. All right. Thanks.